So hopefully you kind of get that this was going to be Chloe's gig, because she had some really fab ideas about choosing a CRM, especially under such trying circumstances as we all find ourselves in, and trying to avoid people panic buying a CRM and potentially getting the wrong system. So what I've done is I've tried to pull together a presentation which runs through some of the basics on what you actually need in order to make a more informed decision and to help you try and navigate through that process. So moving on quickly, so it's how to choose a CRM. Hang on, if I can, there we go. So introduction. So no one has a magic wand, and no one system will have everything in it that you need. The key to finding the right CRM is to find the best fit for your organization, rather than to just go for the one that other people choose or the ones that have such great recommendations. They're obviously going to be the good ones, the ones that are popular, the ones that have a great following, but it needs to be the right one for your organization, and just going for the popular kid isn't necessarily right for you. Before you start looking at scoping and looking at what's on offer, you need to ask yourself whether or not you need a CRM, or whether you should move from the one that you have. Now, this is a really relevant point, because it's not always the right thing to do. The core reasons for actually moving your CRM or moving to a CRM are gaining functionality or improving on the functionality in a way that you would never have with your existing system. The next point is whether you are gaining architecture or data structures that are not or would never be available in your existing system. You need a quantifiable increase in income generation, and the emphasis here is on quantifiable, and a quantifiable reduction in risk to the organisation. So gaining functionality, that will involve things like integrations, mapping, data transfer, improved access. Gaining architecture or data structures are more about whether or not you're gaining more granular income coding or more granular appeal segments and recording. Quantifiable increase in income generation, I mean, that's really easy. So would you be able to claim gift aid and manage the gift aid process? Would you be able to improve the selection so that you're including more people, including the right people in the right asks? And lastly, a quantifiable reduction in risk to the organisation. Things might be improved consent, including audit trails, storing gift aid declarations, or indeed security. In general, I think that before you consider moving your CRM or investing in a CRM implementation, you need to agree with at least 2 of those 4 conditions. Without agreeing with those, without having stuff that is quantifiable, you run the risk of spending a huge amount of money that actually bears little or no return for your organisation. And you need to be really careful that you don't fall into the trap of wanting the next new shiny thing, because often with CRMs, it's thought that, you know, if we get the new system or a newer system, that's going to solve all the problems, and it rarely does. So this next bit is just a little bit that I want you to have a think about. Before you start scoping, make sure that you are make sure you understand if you're scoping for a fundraising CRM or an organisational one. Organisations very often want to achieve a single view that stores information from all across the organisation. And before you start scoping, if you are going down the route of an organisational CRM, think about the feasibility of this and whether or not it's possible to fit all of the data and all of the functionality of the entire organisation into one all-encompassing system. The analogy that I have for this, and you know that I love a crap analogy, is if you take part in 3 different activities, would you wear the same shoes, or would you have a pair that meets the requirements of each one individually? So combining functions isn't always the right thing. That's not to say it's always the wrong thing. And sometimes having multiple systems that collaborate may be the way forward to retain specific functionality that each of the team needs without there being a massive amount of compromise across the board. Because often that's what happens when you try and put everything, when you try and put the whole organisation into one container. Every user, every team, every function ends up having to compromise, so that nobody gets 100% of what they actually essentially need. So the importance of scoping. Obviously you hear myself and Chloe and Serena and other people bang on about how important it is to scope out your new CRM. And not just to go immediately into the, can somebody give me a recommendation? So the importance of scoping, once you've made a decision to choose a new CRM, you need to decide what's important to you as an organisation. And you can do this by starting to draw up a list of all of the things your organisation does that involves data. So examples of this are, you take payments by cheque, by backs, by Just Giving, by direct debit. You record and thank in mem donations or legacies. You want to get in touch with next of kin. And you research grant funding bodies, and you want to apply for grants. When you're compiling this list, at this point, it doesn't have to be pretty, but you do need to be specific and you do need to be granular. The more information that you can pull together at this point, the better your output will be. Next thing you want to do is take all of those individual pieces of information, all that granular stuff, and pull it into headline groups. So the examples that I've got, and you do not have to use these are just examples, are recording and storing information, income processing and reporting, prospect research and pipeline, reporting, functionality and integrations. I also like to add on a couple of bits on the end about onboarding and implementation and other considerations. So these are things that when you go out to find the right supplier for you, you can say to them, what exactly is involved in onboarding? What do I need to do? What will you do? Will we have milestones? How do we know when the project has been completed? What's our measure of success? Other considerations are things like what support you're going to be given afterwards. Is this included? Is there a cost to it? What are the training options? What are the ongoing coaching and mentoring options around our new CRM? Once you have all of your granular stuff and it's now ordered nicely into top line groups, you can then start to add a 1, 2, 3 priority. So number 3 is a deal breaker. So a deal breaker in as much as if this functionality does not exist, we cannot choose this CRM. If you give something a 2 priority, you're saying you could possibly compromise on functionality. So we might not be able to fully automate, but we can create a really streamlined import process. So that would be our compromise. You still need that functionality, but you have a little bit of wiggle room on it. The last one is number 1. So this is a nice to have, the bells and whistles, the stuff and nonsense. And to be honest, from experience, this is all of the stuff that most people focus on during CRM demos. So it's really, really important that before you start looking at what's available, all the different systems, that you actually get your priorities in order so that you can really focus on, if we do not have this CRM is useless to us. So the next bit I just want to mention about, because it comes up quite a lot, around the practicalities of automation. My ideas or my thoughts on this is, don't get carried away with the idea of automation, because the idea of automation really does rarely match reality. Not everything can and should be automated. Automation comes as either standard, so for instance, Donify to go cardless, Razor's Edge just given and so on, or it's bespoke via an API. And one thing to make clear is, even with standard automations, they don't just happen. They all require some setup. So the amount of people that I know that move to Donify, and it's absolutely the right system for them, but they think they can just press a button and there you go, they're all integrated with MailChimp. It doesn't happen like that. There is actually, to give you an indication, when we're doing a MailChimp to Donify integration, just to be on the safe side, we always allow a maximum of 8 hours to set that up, purely because it can take some time to ensure that the MailChimp end of it is actually set up in a way that will talk to Donify and both sides then are mirroring properly. Automation works best for larger volumes of data or significant income channels. So by that I mean, it's not practical to think that you can automate for something where you, for instance, you're only getting standing order, annual standing orders, you get them maybe 5 of them a year. You would not automate that. But there is definitely a sort of a myth that everything can be automated. It's not practical. There is no cost benefit for you to do that. The other thing just to bear in mind as well, automation can hide mistakes which can be difficult to spot. So just pay a little bit of attention to that you do need somebody, especially at the outset, who is able to do some stress testing on any automation to make sure that it is actually happening in the way that you expect it to. So the next bit, are all CRMs equal? I'm sure you've all come across my Lego analogy, and I won't go into it in full detail. If you guys need it, I have actually put the written version on fundraising chat, or we can email you all with a copy directly. But so we're clear about this, you cannot compare necessarily one system with another if you are not comparing the right types of system in the first place. So the first type of system that you have is an out-of-the-box system. So this is equivalent of a pre-built Lego model with a few bits and pieces that you can add to it to make it your own. So this is Razor's Edge and Donify, eTapestry, stuff like that. You then have standard integrations which are introduced into this analogy. So this is a suite of additional pre-made additional decoration and furnishings that you can add to your pre-built model. And then you have an API, which is a specific area that you can create your bespoke extension for your pre-built model. So these are 2 ways that you can take an out-of-the-box system and tailor it more to your own needs. You then have platform CRMs. We all know these are Salesforce and MS Dynamics. And a platform CRM is the equivalent of a box full of loose Lego bricks. So you need to decide what you're going to build, how you're going to build it, you need to find a builder, and you need to manage that build process. The involvement that you will need for implementing a platform CRM is significantly more than you would need for an out-of-the-box system. A platform CRM with some drop-in modules. So this is, you still have your box of loose bricks with some small groups of bricks that are pre-formed. So this is the equivalent of Salesforce MPSP or MS Dynamics Accelerator. Now, there's not a huge difference. It speeds up the process slightly, but for instance, if you go for Salesforce, even with MPSP, what you're doing is you're taking your gift aid module and you're dropping it into your own architecture. So you will still have to make sure that that module works with what you've set up around it. The next one is a weird one. So you've got a box with a mixture of loose bricks. and within that you've also got some larger groups of bricks, but strangers keep offering you up additional groups of bricks that they say are the same as some of the ones that you have, but they're better. And this is essentially what open source is, and the one that is open source is Civi CRM. And the issue that you have with that is that with open source CRMs, you have to work out which group of bricks are the best ones for you. So unless you have somebody who is a very keen developer and can navigate that, this is something that probably should be avoided. The last one is the one that we come across quite often because they do get recommended on fundraising chat, and it's really difficult to try and demonstrate why they don't quite work. So in this one, you have rather than a square box with your Lego, you have a round box, but you're trying to fit a square model in, and it doesn't quite fit, so you end up having to break bits of your Lego model off. And this is basically a commercial CRM. So it's anything that you see that's free or cheap on the internet, things like HubSpot, Zoho, stuff like that. And the reason that it doesn't quite fit is because commercial architecture puts businesses first, and then individuals, consumers, are only associated with the business. With fundraising, we are consumer-led, and therefore we need the architecture hierarchy to focus on the individual and then add in businesses after that. Businesses being trusts, corporate relationships, groups, community groups and stuff like that. So what you're doing is with a commercial CRM, the emphasis is the other way. It's actually in complete reverse to that of a fundraising CRM. So a couple of things to just think about in terms of your implementation and moving forward. Just take a moment and just think about what it is, have you got everything checked off? Have you done everything that you need to do to make sure that when you move forward, you're going to have the most successful implementation? So are you moving for the right reason? So we go back to our 4 key tenets of why you should move your CRM. Is there a clear, definable benefit to the organization? Be really clear about what is definable. It's not good enough to just say, oh, we'll make more money by having it. If you can't define or quantify what that make more money is, then the project will fail. Have you undertaken comprehensive scoping? So are you confident that your choice will handle all of the priority, and that you can a proportion of the stuff you can compromise on, and then if you've got any of the bells and whistles stuff, that's a bonus. So have you gone through everything that you absolutely definitely need and have made sure that the CRM you are moving to will do all of those things in the way that you need? The whole organisation is brought into the decision, and even though as an organisation it's not going to be easy, you are all keen to move forward. This is really, really key. If you have any dissenters, if you have anybody in the organisation that is absolutely against this, especially if they are a key stakeholder or within the senior management team, then again, you really should reconsider about whether or not you move forward with it. And lastly, do you have the right people managing the project? So by the right people, we're talking about people that want to be part of this project. I've seen it before where it's been foisted on somebody, and that just never works. Dumping this project onto somebody who looks like they're not busy is not the right way to proceed. The person that's managing it, are they prepared to learn about the onboarding process? Even if they know nothing about data, are they keen enough that they're going to ask the right questions and they're going to take responsibility for decision making? We'll come into this a little bit later, but it's really, really important that the person managing this project, the person pushing this through for your organisation, is really behind it and is in a position, is empowered both personally and organisationally to make these decisions. So, onboarding. What is onboarding? Because it's a little bit of a jargony term that gets bandied around and nobody really knows what it is. It's just the process of configuring your new CRM, moving your data over and training the users in the new system. It's about getting you on board your new CRM. And what can you expect? You'll need to decide what you want to achieve from your onboarding process. This is quite key, and you need to think about this ahead of the onboarding or the commencement of the onboarding. So you need to think about what data you want to keep and what data you want to remove or archive. You also need to think about what data normalization you want to take place. So things like financial recoding, PAF updates, suppressions, rationalization of supporter codes. There's a myriad of different things that you could do. Actually, it's worth thinking about these things prior to even choosing your CRM, because these two, what data you want to keep and what data you want to get rid of and what data normalization, these may well impact on the implementation partner you have. They might impact on the cost. For instance, data normalization can actually take up a huge amount of time, and the time it just translates into cost. Lastly, you need to think about how the new CRM is going to be configured. This is probably one of the things that you can wait until you have your implementation partner if you are using somebody to help you through the process. But you need to have an idea of how, what is our financial coding going to look like? What activities are we going to have? What constituent coding and all of these things. Everything like this is going to be a question that will need to be answered. So in terms of onboarding, you have different options, and to be honest, the option for onboarding really does depend on what your final choice for CRM is. So there are some systems which will be onboarded by the organisation that actually supplies it. So things like Razors, ETAP and Beacon. Those guys will handle the onboarding process. You will be given an onboarding project manager and they will walk you through that. Some systems you can opt to have onboarding support. So whilst it's not done directly by the organisation, it's done by a partner or somebody who has experience of this. So a good example of that is Donify. And then the last option you have, some systems you can easily onboard yourselves. Now, Donify, you can onboard yourself as well. If you have, if you really have no idea of how it should be configured, I would say use an implementation partner. However, the smaller online systems, things like Zoho and HubSpot, you could just literally just log on now and go get yourself a CRM within about 2 or 3 minutes. So just a couple of things to think about in terms of onboarding. Don't underestimate what is needed from the onboarding process. So if you are unfamiliar with data structures, if you are unfamiliar with how to transform your data so that it works better, then I would suggest you choose somebody who can help navigate you through that process. A good implementation partner will guide you through the process and will highlight where decisions need to be made by you. However, your implementation partner isn't there to make the decisions for you. This is really key. So a surefire way of getting a poor outcome for when you move to a CRM is to actually devolve too much responsibility for the decision making to your implementation partner. It's not their place to decide how things are coded. They can make suggestions, but ultimately you have to understand what the implications of those suggestions are, and how you will work with them going forward. So we've got through the process of scoping, we've got through the process of selection and onboarding. What can you expect after onboarding? So I'm sorry to be a misery guts on this, but don't expect everything to be instantly wonderful. Unfortunately, the reality is you are going to have a minimum of 3 to 6 months of bedding in once your CRM has been configured and the data has been moved over. During this bedding in period, people will be getting used to the way that a new CRM works. They will have to learn how to do the things that they used to do, but to basically do it in a different way to accommodate the new CRM. And they'll also have to work out all the things that they've been told they can start doing, which their old system didn't do, but the new system will. You need to change all of your existing processes to accommodate the new CRM. So even down to basics, like you get the post that comes in, 2 people open it, how do you process the checks, how do you process the CAF vouchers, what does that look like in terms of coding, how does it generate your thank you letters, all of these little bits that you know how to do, you're going to have to relearn it. You're also going to have to wheedle out all of the workarounds and fixes that you used to have in place on the old system, because invariably, if you're moving because your old system was lacking in functionality, it means that there would have been loads of things that you did that are actually now just completely unnecessary. So there's going to be a time where everything is going to be in upheaval, where you wheedle those out. And if it is your first CRM, so if you've come from Excel spreadsheets, for instance, you're going to actually have to learn, oh, well, what do we need in terms of this process? We can't just go and enter it on an Excel spreadsheet. So you're going to need to set up your processes from scratch. And finally, before I'll open it up to questions for you guys, just a couple of things really to bring up, to draw attention to. One of the things that comes up quite regularly is about cost. You need to be realistic about it. Do not expect a fully functional CRM for next to no money. And on the same line, don't expect discounts because you're small or a charity. For instance, I only ever work with charities. I specifically work with small to medium-sized charities. So everybody that I work with, all of my clients are in exactly the same situation as you are. If I just draw your attention back to the beginning and the 4 tenets, the 4 reasons why you would move, if you cannot justify a benefit, a tangible improvement in functionality or any of that, then you have to ask yourself, if you are literally just seeing this process as being a cost, it will fail as well. And if you are just seeing it as a cost, then that's when you start to see it as being a burden, and you will try and get the maximum amount of what you think you want for the least amount of money. That does not make for a happy relationship with either your suppliers or with your CRM. And also, do not decide how much you want to spend and expect suppliers to match it. So, for instance, if you decide you have £5,000, that's how much your implementation is going to cost. But you're, for instance, moving from Razor's Edge and you've got 500,000 actions and 25,000 gifts on there, and your data's never been cleaned and it's in a real mess, you are not going to get all of that data moved onto a new system for £5,000. There is too much data normalization that would be needed for the amount of budget that you have. You may decide that you need to make compromises in what you can achieve for the amount of money that you have. This kind of moves me on to the second point, which is the myth of the new shiny. So crap data and processes are not going to be sorted out by moving to your nice new shiny CRM. And actually, if you don't sort the issues out beforehand, they are going to be magnified when they hit the new system. you often have to make compromises in how you migrate data from system A to system B, because the architecture might be slightly different. And when you do that, if you have any issues in your data, they are just going to get exacerbated. It's going to make the new system clunky, and immediately you get it, people are going to hate it, and it's going to fall out of favour. And again, that is an investment that should never have gone ahead. And the last point here is just going back to this. When you're looking at your scoping, when you're looking at what's important, do not get distracted by all the bells and whistles. You must focus solely on your main priorities, because if you end up with a system that is full of bells and whistles and none of the standard and everyday are in there and they're missing, again, your investment is completely pointless, because you will find that you have an investment that actually bears no fruit for your organisation. So guys, I hope, in light of the fact that I had to pull that together quite quickly, that was useful to some of you. I hope it gave you some ideas, and maybe gave you some food for thought, so that you can go away and have a think about what your situation is, whether you should be moving, whether there are other things that you could do. One of the things actually that I haven't put in there, that I haven't mentioned, that is worth doing, is before you even get to the point of scoping, my recommendation is that you would have a very long, hard look at your existing CRM, if you have one, and to come up with a list of questions that you have around this, and then go and get those questions answered. As an example, I have lots of clients who are in the belief that Razor's Edge doesn't do, and they come up with this massive long list of things that Razor's Edge apparently doesn't do. And I sit there and listen to them patiently and go, actually, it will do everything on your list. And one of the reasons that this comes about, specifically with Razor's Edge, it's because it's a system that's been around for 30 years, and very few people have been on training. Very few people have a Razor's Edge system that is managed properly. And it's, when everybody uses it, they're using it because they used it at their last position or the position before or something like that. And they have a genuine belief that it doesn't do half of what it does do. And there are other systems like that as well. So if you are starting from a position of, we've got a system over here that absolutely doesn't do any of these things, and that's why we're moving, again, you're setting your project up for failure. So ahead of any scoping or anything like that, really drill down and work out whether or not your existing system has been outgrown, if it can be updated, what are the options, do you need to do some training, do you need to expand the system, are there API or development opportunities on your existing system? Because at the end of the day, if you stay with what you have, there is less cost in terms of implementation, there is less downtime and disruption within your organisation, and there is less indirect cost to your organisation through that downtime and stuff like that. So if there is a way that you can stay with what you already have, that's brilliant, but at least then you will know when you go into the scoping part of it, you will start from the best position that you possibly can. So guys, I'm hoping that Chloe, who should be listening in, can unmute you all now, and I will try and answer any questions that you might have, if that's possible.
I'm here as well, Julie.
Okay, cool. Serena is here as well, if you guys couldn't hear that. And Serena is on hand as well to answer any questions.
Hi Julie, my name's Beth. I just wanted to say thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting to listen to. I've been doing other stuff as well whilst I've been listening. but my colleague Charlie's on here as well. So first of all, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you so much, because I think it's a really important way of explaining CRMs, and I've told you what struggles we've had, and and we were due to actually have a lineup of CRMs present to us tomorrow with some questions that we'd pre-asked, although I think we probably postpone it, but you know, we have done it wrong and learnt from it, and we don't want to do it wrong again.
That's, do you know what, it's so lovely to actually hear somebody turn around and say, we did it wrong, we got it wrong, but you know what, we drew a line under it and we're moving away from that. I think that's really important as well, because we've had a couple of clients recently who have actually done a similar thing. So they've got to a stage where they've gone, this isn't working for us, and they've opted to draw a line under it and move away from the course that they were going down. And actually by doing that, they're moving towards something that's much more successful, and it's just much better for their organisation. The outcomes will be so much better as well.
It could be a hard thing to kind of swallow your pride on that almost, or even to convince other internal stakeholders that actually, despite spending X amount, the best thing is to stop, reassess and go somewhere else. So that is actually quite a bold thing to do sometimes.
So you get a gold star from us for doing that.
I'm not sure, you know, we're interested in learning more, and I think the people beforehand who chose the CRM aren't the same team now, so that's really important to acknowledge as well, that we've all learned so much, and we know what we want, and we know what we don't want, so that's really important.
Probably going for the bells and whistles and missing out the stuff that you actually do need to be able to function, because that's what we normally find.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions, guys, or are you still sort of processing my, however long it was, waffle?
No. I'm just going to process it for now. Thank you.
Cool. Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I was going to ask a question, but I think I've interrupted David, so I'll let him go first.
No, it's fine. I've stopped.
I was just going to say, well, first, Beth, as Julie and Serena know, and I posted on fundraising chat, our organisation went through a similar crisis where we'd for some reason that's sort of beyond me, we chose to get a bespoke CRM built for us. I think the rationale was that as a higher education institution, we wanted to create what Julie was talking about earlier, which was an all-encompassing system that worked for every department, from fundraising to partnerships to student records to admin to everything. And we thought, I think Leeds University has something like 14 different CRMs, and we thought, we don't want to go down that route. We want to try and get one thing that works for everyone. So we found a delivery partner to build this for us, and 2 years later, not much was happening, and it seemed that maybe we got into a certain point with them and they'd done a certain amount of work, but we thought, we can't wait another 2 years to have a CRM ready for the fundraising team, because we're using a very cheap sort of just bog standard thing, and as we're growing it was no longer fit for purpose. So we did the similar thing, and we thought, right, we've just got to draw a line under this and start again and think, what do we actually need? And I think that was a very liberating decision to make, even though, you know, you spend a certain amount of money, but you think, we can throw as much money at this thing as we want, it's not going to work, we might as well just start again. So we're in a similar position, so it's really encouraging to hear that we're not the only one who went through that. My question really is, And we're at the stage where we're looking at various different CRMs. We've been looking at things like Beacon and Donify and Thank You and Salesforce and the whole shebang, trying to find something that works for as many people as possible without having too much compromise. And you look at the list of features that different systems claim to do. Like if I get up Donify, for example, who I'm aware have had very good reviews, and they're saying, oh, we can do things like soft credit gifts to other constituents and customize acknowledgements at gift level, and we can have search engines and tagging and that kind of thing. And you look at these lists and you think that's great, but actually how much of this is just bog standard stuff that pretty much every single CRM is going to offer, and how much of it is actually unique to that organization? So I think that's really my question, is what features in a CRM should we expect to find across the board, and are there any specific systems which deliver things a bit better than other systems, if that makes sense? Sorry, that was a very long-winded question.
No, that actually is a really good question. So no, I don't think there is the perfect system. I think what there is a whole group of different systems, some of which have a strength in one area and some which have strengths in other areas. So that's why it's important to work out, what your priority functionality is that you actually need. So I think there is a core of functionality that you would expect every single system to be able to do. So for instance, you would expect every system to be able to store a name and address. You would expect every system to be able to store multiple addresses. You would expect every system to be able to store or record interactions between yourself and your contact. That might be a supporter, that might be a contact, a grant-making trust or something like that. I think it's also safe to say that most systems you can add connections or relationships between entities, between constituent records. And I think most systems, it would be expected that you can do things like soft crediting. So I think there is a core of things that should be almost that you don't have to think about. You would expect them to be there. And then I think there's some other stuff that some CRMs do better than others. So as an example, if I had two clients, one client that was very big on trust and foundation fundraising, and one client that had very, very complex analysis and reporting requirements, for the one that did trust and foundation fundraising, I would recommend Donify, because Donify does it so beautifully with opportunities. I think it's one of the easiest systems for creating a pipeline and managing opportunities and pledges and all of that and doing your researching. It just does it. It just works really, really well. But Razor's Edge is much better when you're talking about complex analysis and reporting. So, they might be, the two organisations might be similar in size. They might be similar in sort of their income turnover. They might be broadly similar in what they do, how they fundraise and stuff. But actually, those two different things would lead me to recommend this system for client A and this system for client B. So this is where you get down to understanding what is important for you. What is it that you need that is going to increase your income? So if it is the trust stuff, if that's where a lot of your income is coming from, then absolutely that's what you need to focus on. You can work around, you don't need such complex reporting on individuals or anything like that. That's what you should look at. So I think it's fair to say, think about where your income is coming up from, except that there is a core of functionality that should be standard across all CRMs. And then look at where your income is coming from and look at the functionality around those major income streams and really focus on which system does that better. Because I think, again, what you're looking at is you guys don't have that much time, especially at the moment. I mean, things are all up in the air. So actually spend a little bit of time just looking at core functionality and then spend more time really drilling down and asking the pertinent questions of the potential CRM supplier about these key areas of fundraising or functionality that you need to focus on. So just get rid of the noise. Yeah, it will do that. This is what we need to have the detailed discussions on. And then when you're looking at demos, actually I would go along the lines of, if you're looking at, say, trust and foundation fundraising, specifically ask the suppliers. So if it's Razor's Edge, if it's Donify, if it's Beacon, ETAP, Thank You, whatever, get them to do 15 minutes specifically on an end-to-end process for managing a trust application from the research phase right the way through to receiving money. Does that in any way help you at all, Laura?
No, I'm writing it down. I'm not ignoring it. No, that's really helpful. And I think our kind of main issue is that we're not just looking for a fundraising CRM. We're looking for something that works for our partnerships team and maybe our marketing team as well, in terms of communications and things like that. And they're moving away from MailChimp, which obviously raises all these questions about, well, you know, lots of CRMs seem to like integrating with MailChimp, but if they're moving to another mailing platform, then is that going to integrate? And, you know, is that where the compromise is? So we want to say, actually, the marketing team just needs a completely separate system to what we want.
Isn't that about getting automation and collaboration mixed up again? So you don't have,
exactly.
It's not necessarily a compromise if you can't integrate, because you can still collaborate. And actually, if you think about, gosh, let's make it easy, put it in terms we can kind of understand, I guess. If you think about Office 365 by Microsoft, they have, it's not just one thing, is it? It's a whole host of different things that you can use according to what functionality that you need at the time. But what they do is they sit together, they can talk to each other. You can use things like MS Teams. You can use OneDrive to centrally store all of this stuff. So I think there is a clear, for me, there is this massive myth about integration and automation and the fact that that's like the be all and end all. But actually, I think collaboration is a much, much stronger concept. And actually, most things can collaborate together. So one of the things that I do is to get clients to actually understand if they have two systems. So you've got system A and you've got system B. So for instance, you've got a volunteer system and you've got a fundraising CRM. And it's like, no, we need to put those in the same thing. Well, why do you need to do that? Because volunteering, you need to go through, you need the volunteer application process, and you probably need to do the DBS checking, and you need to do the induction process, and then ongoing, you need to manage their volunteer hours and all of that and their expenses. So actually, get something that does that really well, because you don't need all of that information to be on your fundraising CRM. What you actually need on your fundraising CRM is when you open up a constituent record to actually see this person is a volunteer. You don't need to see their DBS check or their application form. So it's drilling down into what is it you need to see when you get down to the point where actually I just need something that says that this person's a volunteer. Collaboration immediately becomes so much easier. because then you're talking about a little bit of API development. So as an example, something I've recommended recently is using Breathe HR, which actually manages volunteers really well and is, I think it's free or really cheap for charities. That will manage the whole of the volunteer process. Breathe HR has an API, as does Razor's Edge NXT, and all you need is a little bit of development just to swap a small piece of information over to say that this person is a volunteer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we use Breathe, so I can vouch. Brilliant.
Yeah, but it's just, what is it you actually need to know? You do not need to know what size their pants are. You just need to know that they wear pants.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool. Are there any other questions, or have I blathered on enough for the afternoon? And obviously, anybody else, if anybody else has any questions, you can email them to me, email them to Chloe, grab me on fundraising chat, whatever. I will always answer a question for you, or drop me a instant message on Facebook as well.